At least I think it's morning. Still kind of waking up and getting into the groove and spending time with God and enjoying the sunshine. Today we're supposed to have an extremely warm day, so it's going to be interesting because some of my pots are already blooming and plants are growing and things just seem to be happening. One of the things that's happening lately is that we have expanded our news board, because last time that I recorded anything I said something about we wanted to take this wall and we wanted to develop it into Last Generation Network News so that we can begin to teach about fallacies and about how misinformation and disinformation is going on, especially within not just the news media, but among Christians themselves. How, unfortunately, there are prophecy sites and there are people that are exaggerating the news or using it in a way to profit from or to sell their books or to develop some kind of ministry for themselves, and in reality not giving out information. We discussed how we're going to take, as it were, this board and begin to put up articles maybe and begin to show how you segment or you segregate a lot of the news segments of what an article and a paragraph has, because in English, a lot of people, though they are not English majors and haven't gone to universities or haven't maybe been in creative writing like I have, or developed into the writing skills that maybe they haven't pursued as much as they'd like to, don't realize how much information sometimes is changed so that you won't understand it quite in the way that it should be presented, which is just simply information. And so we're going to get into that discussion of fallacies under Last Generation Network News, and that'll be kind of fun because that's one of the teaching things that we want to do besides just presenting news. Now, if we do get a news desk, which we might, we're still praying about that part, it'll be similar to this and it'll be off of this wall. We might do some in the news, featured stories. For instance, like in Last Generation Network News, if you've been following along on the websites and on the Facebook page, then you see that we usually feature 5 articles, whether it be from the World News Desk, from, well, let's just give an intro. Last Generation Network News. What we do is that we present a aggregate of a bunch of news services that have RSS feeds, meaning that they're sent over the internet and that they feed into a segment that's posted on what we call a news format. In other words, it's a newspaper page that looks just like a newspaper, and you can click on it and the article pops up, and you can read it. And those are RSS feeds that are aggregate, which means that they have been inputted from the internet. And so normally we have our Last Generation Network News World News. So it's Last Generation World News Desk. And that particular page, when it pops up on Facebook, will show you the aggregate or accumulation of a bunch of news stories and videos and information that has come off of the feeds that we are allowed to put in. We can only do a certain amount of them because it's a free service, so it's just something that's been provided that we use in order to give out information from the World Desk. But then also what we do is we go out of our way to find at least five world news stories that are featured. So we post the link and we post a picture of the Last Generation World News Desk, and then we feature 5 world news stories that we believe are relevant to the readership that we have and that they would be interested in reading. So we go out of our way to look for those, and we pull them from a variety of sources. So it's not from a blog, and it's not just simply an RSS feed that we don't have any personal contact in, but it's rather something that I specifically look for and research in order to prove that the article is valid, and then usually use it from a pretty reliable source. Sometimes maybe one slips by, maybe not, but they're just featured stories. And we do that with the world. We do that with world news. We do that with Jewish news. We do that with Jerusalem and Israeli news. We do that with headline news. These are all headline news desk, Jewish news desk, Jerusalem and Israel news desk, world news desk, technology news desk, political news desk. We have a devotions news desk from the good news segment of the Last Generation Network News. we have trying to think of all the desks. And what we'll do later is that when we have another presentation, we'll put up Last Generation Network News and all the desks that have all papers that are printed every day and that go out over the internet, as well as available to you, on the click and read as you choose, what you want to read. And then usually they feature stories if we have time. If we don't, they don't feature stories. But usually about once a week at least, we try to feature them on the Facebook page or on Twitter and on some other network service that's social media oriented. In Last Generation Network News, we also recognize, because we are the last generation, and that's pretty obvious. Ever since Israel became a nation, we knew that the timetable had began, that we were counting down until the Lord returns. And everyone should know that. That's your base fact that is indisputable. It's something that you can say, the clock has started. Now, whether you take that from 1948 or 7, or whether you take that from 1897 with the World Zionist Congress, or whether you take it from 1967 from the unification of Jerusalem, that's kind of debatable. But the point is when Israel and the Jew came back into the land, the timetable started. So we know we're in the last generation, and you and I, we're going to see the Lord's return. So in that respect, we also have a variety of prophecy sites and prophecy services that we provide for people to study in order to show themselves approved unto God, that workmen need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So they would know what is fact from fiction. They would know what is fancy from being accurately portraying what the Bible says. That's why we have the Biblical Prophecy Today news services, that we present information that we see as pretty much mostly reliable. Sometimes you do find some things that are questionable, and you kind of go, well, I don't know about that. That seems kind of weird to me. It's kind of like, I don't know what they're saying. But for the most part, on Biblical Prophecy Today, we try to stick to the main line. We try to present those things that we can prove and demonstrate, and I can answer the questions for as an editor-in-chief of Biblical Prophecy Today, and provide for those answers that involve those things that we see in the world happening today that are proclaiming that Jesus is coming again. So Biblical Prophecy Today is pretty much a standard site. Because of the recent advent of so many prophecy sites getting into advertising and getting into profit making and taking, and what I mean by profit taking is that what they do is that as soon as you click on their site, they get money. As soon as you click on any of their articles, they get money. As soon as you even visit their site, they get money. In other words, they're doing it to pay for the ministry, but sometimes some of the sites will exaggerate to get more click-its, so that you will click it and get or pay for that person to have a blog, so that they're making money off of their popularity with you. So sometimes that can influence people to maybe not give accurate information. And I know that there are quite a few sites out there that do that. And I hate to mention them because, they are mentioned under Prophecy Research and Development and under Tabloid Christianity, which we run. For instance, like Now the End Begins was just a recent upstart, page, and it was a blog that's been reworked into sensationalism. They want to make everything over the top, sensationalized, so that you'll get excited, whether it be about salvation, whether it be about prophecy, whether it be about politics, whether it be about conspiracy. They don't hide the fact that they want to sensationalize everything. That doesn't mean they're accurate. It just means that they're sensational. That's all. They're going to throw things at you that may be completely off the wall. They have lots of people, and they're very indiscriminate as long as you don't criticize their website, because they have a lot of people who contribute things on their sites that are anti-Semitic, that have hate-based media involved in it. I mean, there's a lot of things that are like, I'm sorry, I in all good conscience could not repost or reprint some of their material because, frankly, there's too much of the other stuff involved with it. And I don't want people to be misled or confused or abused by way of the privilege of grace that we've been given, and in some way be misled and led astray by someone who's taken a ministry and just run with it to sensationalize. WND would be another prime example where, Joseph Farrar has gone way out of his way to exaggerate and become tabloid Christianity. The perfect example of it, would be WorldNet News, or WorldNet Daily, I think. WND had WorldNet Daily News. And they greatly exaggerate and put out stories that aren't true. I mean, it's proven not true. And they can get away with it because it's a tabloid. It's not a factual news service. So we have Biblical Prophecy Today to counteract that. That was what the Lord inspired me with. Biblical Prophecy Today originally had started as a website, or not Biblical Prophecy, Prophecy Today blog was a dynamic mini ministry that I remember when it first got started. I was kind of making comments and involved with the person who was running it. And it started off as pretty good. It was a pretty accurate site. And then they began to get into money making, and they began to admit they were making money and that they wanted to make money. And so they kept using all these different tools in order to develop the click it, make money routine. And then they began to just kind of fade in and out of participation in the ministry, and then kind of sort of get involved in it, sort of screen it, sort of not. Then they got pretty narrow-minded about picking out certain things and then calling people certain, unfortunately, labels, by labeling them as not reliable. A good example would be Chuck Smith, which was kind of humorous. It's like, yeah, Chuck's not reliable. Sure, okay. So, because of how I had seen some of these sites go downhill, we started Biblical Prophecy Today a while back. And we've developed it at different times and places, as much as we can, and we make it a part of our family of Last Generation Network news services so that we provide prophecy in a consistent way, but also in a precise way, so it's not exaggerated and it's not sensationalized. So, Prophecy Research and Development actually came out of Biblical Prophecy Today. Because there were so many sites that were so off the wall, I needed a place to list them and begin to say to people, look, we need to research this a little deeper. You need to look at these articles a little closer to see if they're accurate, because sometimes some things, for instance, I'll give you a good example. Chuck Missler is a wonderful Bible teacher. He gives you all kinds of information. It doesn't mean he's always right. It means that he's giving you a lot of information that he wants you to do research on, that he wants you to study for yourself. He wants you to prove all things, hold fast that which is good. So he doesn't claim that everything that he's saying is gospel truth, but he does state to you that he wants you to study. So the same thing is true about Prophecy Research and Development. Whenever we feel that there's something that needs to be developed or researched, then we post it within Prophecy Research and Development. And in the video series, we're going to present how prophecy is distorted or sometimes contorted in order to fit, someone's idealism, meaning what we call tendentialism. Tendentialism is the idea that you take an idea that you have about prophecy and then you put it into the scripture to make it fit. That's where you put the theology into the scripture rather than the scripture makes the theology. It's a reversal of what we should be doing as far as expository or explaining or examining the scriptures to see what the Bible has to say, because the Bible says what it means what it says. And we'll look at all those kind of things, when we get into Prophecy Research and Development. I know you're probably looking at this going, that's a little weird looking. What are the ducks? Well, you see, this whole thing of what we're doing right now is called getting your ducks in a row. Whenever you have, colloquialisms, you have these expressions that came from something that said, oh, well, this is a penny saved is a penny earned, or this is this and this is that, and somehow they get moved into our society and they somehow sound good, and sometimes they're accurate and sometimes they're not, but they're not necessarily scriptural. And getting your ducks in a row is kind of like learning to think for yourself. In other words, you need to get your ducks in order. You need to get your ideas lined out. And what we're going to do is we're going to play with that theme throughout Last Generation Network News as well as Prophecy Research and Development. We're going to show what each duck is, whether it be a duck of perspective, duck the perspective. Because see, sometimes a duck is just somebody waddling around and quacking. Sometimes a duck is duck soup, whether it be comedy or whether it be your goose is cooked. And sometimes ducking is something you need to do when somebody's throwing something at you, because you just got to duck from it. And so we use the duck a lot when we come to information, and that's why we're going to say we get our ducks in a row. Because if you get your ducks in a row, then you know when to duck, when to boil it, when to align it, and when to keep it in perspective. And so each one of the ducks represents something like perspective and presentation and a lot of different, and they're not all P's, factual, fact checks. When we present ducks, they'll be a little more dressed out and they'll look like it. But for today, we wanted to explain just all the different ministries that are involved in Last Generation Network News. And then Last Generation is our magazine. Is that on the web? We do have a magazine that's been developed, but just really haven't had time to go fully into it. And basically, it's down here. Is that it's really cool. You know, it's actually a pretty cool theme. I just don't have time to go more with it. You know, is that I look forward to actually in VidDevo, you know, developing all of this and all of our sets so that way I can get time free to get back to writing, which is what I do. Some people like VidDevo and all that I'm doing on the internet with the ministry of, you know, videos, because they see for themselves and they're able to understand sometimes a little more precisely the things that God might be inspiring them or confirming to them. Because a lot of times, you know, it has nothing to do with me being smart or me giving some information, because it's not me doing it, it's Holy Spirit. But rather, it's just sometimes people need a little encouragement, a little exhortation to say, yes, you're right, see, this is why. And I can do that for the why part. Sometimes I get put in positions where people, you know, have to tell them, no, that's not right. But, you know, the reason why you're going off is because, you know, this is where you went off at, you know. They don't like that, but if they watch it on a video, then they realize that my heart is right, that God has inspired me with a certain amount of gifts and abilities that He uses in order to bring people to an understanding of the truth. Now, what they may do with the truth, hey, God bless you, go with it, run with it, do what you want, you know, but just do it with God. Don't do it as though you're obstinate and you've got blinders on and you're going to run along headlong into a wall. Then I could warn you that the wall's there. All I'm going to say is, hey, look, there's a wall out there. Bam, you're going to smack into it. Sure enough, some people do. So Last Generation is the magazine aspect of it, and sometimes we're using Last Generation in order to bring out the timing of the Lord. Like we're doing a series currently on the internet that talks about, yes, Jesus is coming. No, He's not coming in 2012. In other words, there is no valid reason for people to be having a huge expectation that Jesus is going to return in 2012. That's just stupid. That's just some Mayan idea or some lectern from Nostradamus or some convocation of the confluence of the planets aligned in some way that they're expecting some gravity well to exist that doesn't exist, and then expecting some planet to appear that doesn't appear, like Nibiru or Kohoutek, you know, in the past, or like now they brought it back up again and tried it with the latest last year's asteroid going to destroy us, and it didn't happen. So a lot of times what you find is people wanting to teach the imminency of the return of Jesus Christ, which He's going to. He's going to happen in returning to us for the rapture as well as for the second coming in our generation. We are the last generation. I'm a Jesus freak, I know that. I'm pre-trib rapture, you know, I believe in all this stuff. I don't believe in it quite the same way you may understand it, because sometimes people exaggerate some of the things that they believe about it. And, you know, I'm not into a rapture disaster, you know, routine that's going to happen at the rapture. Everything's going to come crashing down. Planes are going to burst into flame, you know, and people are going to crash into each other. The world's going to come to chaos. I don't think so. But we'll explain that when we get into, you know, the Last Generation, as you'll see. But Last Generation, when we're using the time clock, is talking about the Lord's return, because people have asked me regularly, how come you keep being the prophet of no when you keep telling everyone, no, He's not coming in 2012? Well, I've been doing that for a long time now. You know, I grew up in the Jesus movement on the Lord's return. I know. You know, we studied it. We've been around with Jesus going the imminency of His return for a long time. But I was one of those that always said, nah, you know, I kind of sat down. There's a lot of reasons why I believe what I do. But I sat down and I proved it to myself, and I examined all the scriptures over the years, and through this long-term process of studying, came to the conclusion that it would happen anytime after 2012, but not during and not before. And so, you know, I've been right, because we're still here, unless God didn't take very many. Oops, that's possible. But the point being is that in this last generation, using the time stopwatch, we have presented when we do think that the Lord will return. And I'm not one to set an exact date, but I'll give you within a week or a month. So if you really want to have fun with me, and enjoy prophecy and get excited about kind of looking at things, then I'll tell you, I have a personal opinion of the year and the date, possibly, that is probable, I think within a factor of maybe 75 to 90% dial range. And so that's what we've been doing, is presenting the information on the internet, on the Biblical Prophecy Today site, as well as on the Prophecy Research and Development, of the timing of the Lord's return. When will it probably happen? And we have, right now, we presented the first one already, and I think there's 12, maybe 13 different theories that are major timetable theories that people can examine for themselves and work out a timetable, generally speaking, when they think that the Lord will return. To give you an oversight, basically, most people think that the Lord will return sometime between 2015 and 2017, somewhere within the 2015 to 2022 window. The absolute latest date that most people assume that Jesus will return, or else we're not having a return, is 2032. Almost every timetable that everyone has of any kind of fulfillment of prophecy coming together, whether it be for the Jew, for the Jerusalem, for the temple being rebuilt, for the 10-nation confederacy, whether the monetary system or in reality, the sign of the beast, the mark of the beast, and the number of his name, which is the three things that we're supposed to be looking for, not necessarily about the buying and the selling part, but everybody's caught up into that right now, and we'll talk about that too. But in prophecy, most people that I know that really have pretty much a handle on not being caught up in the latest, greatest phase of we're going to blame Islam, or we're going to do this, or we're going to create a Psalm something more, usually put the timetable as the absolute latest date, and earliest dates. They kind of work with that, and then in between they put what they can pretty much prove certain timetables exist. 2032 is your absolute latest date. You might as well forget it after that. Then we can all just kick back and do something else, because if he ain't come by then, he ain't coming again. Sorry, that's the way I live. Now, prior to that, then they usually subtract, because when they say latest date, they're usually talking about by that time the millennium will start. But prior to that, then they usually take 7 off of that for a pre-trib, so many years off of different aspects of it. So in getting into that precision, then that's why they kind of come up with this right around 2015 to 2022 kind of window thing. Now, me personally, I'm a little more skeptical, and I'm also a little more optimistic. I personally hope, and pray, that I be counted worthy, that God would spare me of all these things that are coming upon the world, that we need to pray to be counted worthy, but that any time after 2012 is a possibility. Now, the factor of probability increases after 2012. Usually, like within 2013, you begin to get probably a 10% bump in probability factors, because more things come together in a confluence of events that we can look at, whether it be the Feast of Trumpets or any of the other feasts that are being celebrated that haven't been fulfilled, or whether we look at timetable as far as the planets are concerned, or numerical equivalencies, or just prophecies that are involved that seem to be coming true that we can see in the world events. So when you add all the pieces together, as we're doing in Last Generation, the timetable, then you begin to see why you can kind of factor in every prophecy into a probability factor. And that's what we do, is we work on probability. When is the probability of the Lord's return? And so I say from 2013 onward to probably, 2013, 2017 looks pretty good, for me, and I'm kind of like living my life that way. So all of our ministries in Last Generation Network News, as well as in the prophecy sites that we are involved in, that we do, are all geared towards that factor of realizing that from 2013 onward, whatever you wanted to do, do it. If you wanted to have a ministry warning people, if you wanted to sell some bonds, or you wanted to, prepare for something, or do whatever it is that you feel like you need to do, you better do it. Because our goal has been for the last 5 years to gear up prepare and gear up all the websites, the blogs, the news services, the videos, the VidDevos, and everything for this big launch at 2013 to just go crazy for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, however long years it takes, to just constantly be going with, Lord, watch for the Lord's return. Get people saved. Share the gospel. Do whatever it is. Disciple, train, learn, grow, do, be, exist. Because we're not looking for a revival at the end of the world. Not especially in 2013 onward. We're actually looking for most people being burned out, bummed out, blown out, and just off the wall, going in the wrong direction. And we want to point them in the right direction. Because, frankly, I already know a lot of people that just aren't going to go. A lot of people that are going to be remaining, and we want to share the word as much as we can. So, what happened with all of that was that as we recorded VidDevo, I came across some interesting introductions, and something that I've always wanted to do, because I wrote some songs about it and I've done some Bible studies about it, but I've always told people that one of the biggest fears I had was that America would be marching into the Valley of Megiddo. Is that, one of the things that we were doing was we were preparing people for the military service, and that somehow we would become a militaristic nation, that we would exonerate violence as though it were the right way to be a Christian, and play down martyrdom as though it were the wrong way to live your life. And so we would suddenly reverse and become more satanic than godly, and that we would actually be giving a generation the tools, the mindset, and the heart to walk right into the Valley of Megiddo and act as soldiers for the Antichrist. And that scared me. Because we used to sing about that, from the songs of the love song in the old Jesus movement, when we used to sing, no, you wouldn't want to be there down Jerusalem way, you wouldn't want to be there heading for your grave. It was this popular song that was kind of cute, meaning that, hey, you don't want to be marching to Jerusalem, you don't want to be going to Israel, Not at the time, when they're all going to be fighting there in Megiddo, because that's Armageddon. Well, Armageddon generation came out of the idea that we have a generation now that has no heart, no soul, and no spirit, because it's willing to kill its parents, it's willing to shoot each other, it's willing to kill themselves, much less go into the Valley of Megiddo and die for the sake of an Antichrist. Armageddon generation is probably one of the most serious projects I've ever worked on, and I'm working on a consistent basis. I've only produced one. And we used the song, I Wish We'd All Been Ready by Larry Norman. And if I could find it, I love the rendition that Pat Boone did of Songs of the Jesus People. And his version I really wish I could find so I could use it as a background. For all, a shameless plug for all you people out there. If you could find that album, please tell me where. I'll buy it. I'll get the money together somehow. I need that album. It's got so many good songs on it. But anyways, I use Larry Norman's version, and because he wrote it, and it really does bring home the reality aspect that I wish we'd all been ready, because sadly, maybe your mother, your father, your son, your daughter, someone you know, is part of this Armageddon generation, that they will be there. That whether you go in the rapture or you don't, or you're left behind, or however it works out for you, or however it works out for them, they are the last generation, really. And they are the Armageddon generation. The generation that saw mankind abdicate its rule forever and no longer be in charge of anything, because Jesus will be. So on the positive side, it's a wonderful way of remembering Jesus, but on the negative side, what a tragedy to think of all the souls that are lost in the Valley of Megiddo because they weren't ready. That's why we do what we do. That's why, and what the motivation of Last Generation Network News is. That's why we present a news service. That's why we do Biblical Prophecy Today, Prophecy Research and Development, Last Generation, as well as Armageddon Generation, is because we're proclaiming not just good news, but warning people that the end is near, the end of mankind's self-rule, and that our free will and determination that we think that we have, the freedom of choice to go out and do anything that we want to do, is ending. God is judging. and he's going to judge. In order to be spared of that judgment, the great white throne, then we need to know Jesus in a personal, intimate way, because even Jesus himself said that there would be many that come to him in that day, in the day that we stand before him, and they would say, have we not done marvelous works in thy name? Have we not done all these ministries for you? Have we not done all these things to proclaim you? And we've even raised the dead, and we've done these things that look so wonderful and healed people. And Jesus will say, depart from me, I never knew you. And it says he casts them out. Now, some people say that's not judgment, but that you're eternally saved, or that you're always saved, and once saved, always saved. And God bless you if that's true. I don't mind, because I do believe that once saved, always saved. But the only person who knows that they're saved is God knows that they're saved, because their name is written in the book of life. Other than that, I don't know I'm saved. I pray that I be counted worthy to be spared of all these things that are coming upon the world, not just for the rapture, but also that Jesus, I want him to present me faultless before the Father with exceeding joy, that he would develop his relationship to me and with me and in me, so that I'm talking with him in a personal, intimate way, so there's no question as to, am I a Christian or am I not? Am I in relationship or am I out of fellowship with him? Because I don't want to be caught like a thief in the night. I don't want to be caught unawares. I don't want to be caught in sin, though I may be forgiven. And then for the consequences of sin, that I be left behind in some way, that God would want me to develop in something that maybe I wasn't counted worthy to be spared. That God said in the letters to the 7 churches that not all churches were going into the rapture, but only 1 out of 7 makes it, and 6 are sent into tribulation. I don't want to be there. So you see, there's a lot to be said about prophecy and about studying that doesn't have to do only with end times, but it has to do with a personal relationship with Jesus, because the spirit of prophecy is the spirit of Jesus. It is about him, for him, and with him that we involve all these ministries to remind you why you were here and what you were to do with him. None of this matters anything at all. None of it is important. Not one piece of information that we're going to do with Biblical Prophecy Today checklist, when we go through the news stories and we check off whether they're accurate or whether they're phony, whether they're just something made up or whether they're just kind of like, that's prophecy. Or whether we go through some of the read all about it sensationalism things that are going to be happening, that people are going to try to get you to get involved in, to buy their book, to go to their seminar, to participate in their way of examining things. Pardon me, if any of this isn't about Jesus, I won't put it out, and I won't put it up, and I won't talk about it. That's how serious I think that the times we live in are. And we are told to be sober-minded in these latter days. So as the Last Generation Network News CEO, no, I'm not. As the Last Generation Network News Editor-in-Chief, until the Lord returns, then I pray that you would check out our board, check out our ministries, check out these things and prove to yourselves whatsoever things be true, because if they're not, reject them. But if they're helping you in some way to turn to the Lord in a more intimate and personal way, then I could hope for no other way for you to go than to walk with Jesus today. Not just because of this, but because of him.